fact that Starbucks is not about the coffee. Now, you would talk to Howard Schultz, who I get to talk to, and I'm actually going to do yet another book about Starbucks for you guys. It'll be out in 2012 called Revitalizing the Starbucks Experience, and we're in the process of making that happen. But the fact is, they'll say, yeah, it's all about the coffee. It's all about the coffee, but they're not in the coffee business. They're in the people business. They're serving coffee to people. They're not serving coffee. And for a long time, they were just serving coffee. So we're going to talk about what is this value-added strategy that is not about the coffee, but it's about the experience. And I have to take you down the block from the first Starbucks store to get you to this conversation. I have to take you to a place that's near and dear to my heart. It's called the Pike Place Fish Market in Seattle, Washington. And the Pike Place Fish Market is in an area called the Pike Place Market. It looks over onto Elliott Bay. It's a vaudevillian sort of area with a lot of farmers market type feel to it. They have a lot of produce and a lot of flowers, a lot of street musicians playing, and there's also a number of coffee shops in the area. That is the 5 or 6 block area called Pike Place Market. And in the Pike Place Market, there is this little fish market called Pike Place Fish Market. There are also 4 other fish markets there. And then there's Starbucks, about a block and a half down. Okay, so you have the basic imagery of where we are in Seattle, Washington. A lot cooler, a lot grayer, but almost as rainy as it was this weekend in Singapore. Okay, so as a result of that, that's where we are. Now, why do I have to take you to this little market? Because this market is an inspiration for Starbucks. And so we have to kind of learn about it first, and then we get to move down and have the conversation about Starbucks. This little market is owned by a guy who understood that it's not about the product. It's not about the fish or the coffee. It's about this. It's about the experience over a cup of coffee that has to be created in order to add value to a brand. So that's really where this starts. So let's take you to Johnny Yokoyama and the Pike Place Market. Let's start even before that with a conversation from a guy by the name of Kevin Roberts. I don't know if you know Kevin Roberts' work. He worked for Saatchi & Saatchi, an advertising agency. And he defined brands in such a powerful way. And I think it's a good conversation for us. He said the ultimate goal of every brand is to become a love mark. A love mark. Now, what is a love mark? It's not a mark that we just like, obviously. It's something different than that. Do you have a love mark brand? Because I'll tell you, Starbucks is a love mark brand. Is there any other brands that you can think of that you really kind of feel positive emotionally toward? Y'all aren't going to answer, right? Because people, you know. I was down in Peru, and they have a beverage there called Inca Kola. I don't know if you know anything about this stuff. It's yellow. It's kind of strange in its flavor. But Inca Kola is loved by the Peruvians so much. And it's a brand that's associated with every holiday and every celebration and anything of significance you have to have an Inca Kola with. So when Coca-Cola went down to Peru to be able to penetrate the market, they thought they could wipe out Inca Kola because they wipe out every local brand. They're just an amazing brand. And yet they couldn't beat Inca Kola. And ultimately, Coca-Cola had to buy Inca Kola because they could not overtake Inca Kola. Now, that's a sad truth, isn't it? The mighty Coca-Cola gets beaten out by Inca Kola. That's a love mark. It's a brand that would not be penetrated by a more powerful brand. It had such a loyalty among a population that it was preferred, despite the fact that other brands had more financial resources to beat them. Do you have a love mark? A brand that's really emotionally connected to you? Well, let's take a look at what it takes to become a love mark and where we don't want to be and what coffee can be. Coffee can be a commodity. And by a commodity, it means that, and I'm going to use this red line to mean the love and the black line to mean the respect. So if we look at this quadrant, in the low respect, low love category is a commodity. Are you selling a commodity? Is what you sell have no love and no respect? I can't get any respect in the Rodney Dangerfield comedy character, or, you know, what's love got to do with it? Great song of the same name. The reality is coffee is, by its nature, a commodity. You can buy it in the open market. You can pay a very low price to get coffee beans, particularly if you're kind of at the bottom end of the Robusta stylings of beans. You can get some really cheap coffee out there on the open market right now. And it's all price driven. You put it in silos. It's stored in a silo, and you can just buy it on the open market. Probably about 3 cents U.S. cup value for cheap coffee. no love to a 3-cent cup of stored coffee beans. And really, that is the opportunity that many businesses have. They try to compete on price alone, and they really have very little respect, and the only thing that gets them any success is being the cheapest. So, are you a commodity? We'll start with that as an idea. Starbucks certainly could have been that. They never really were that. From the beginning, they always went for high-end coffee beans, and they sold them from this little coffee shop in Seattle, Washington, that ultimately really wasn't very loved. It was just respected. Now, here's a product you can be. This is kind of a fun product, to be a fad. If you're a fad, you are loved but not respected. For all of a sudden, everybody's into it. You've got the iFart app on your iPhone, right? And everybody's going, ooh, this is so cool. Oh, that's really special, I mean, that has no love. It's just disgusting. And people are sharing it out of disgust and weirdness and being 15 or something, and yet everybody's buying it for 99 cents. And a friend of mine, Joel Comm, who actually created it and who also wrote the book Twitter Power, has made millions of dollars off the stupidest of things. Right? I mean, truly, what was a whoopee cushion in my parents' generation is now an application on your iPhone. And millions of people buy it. And the next morning they wake up and they said, what kind of idiot am I? Thank goodness it was only 99 cents. Little did they know that 999,000 other people bought it last night too. And they don't use the application after a week. And in fact, most iPhone applications aren't used after 20 days. The application you buy today is not actually used. You limit yourself to a narrow number of applications despite the fact they seem cool when you first buy them. Those are fads. You can make a lot of money on a fad, but it's not sustainable. You have to come up with a new fad. It's loved for a while, but not respected. There are a lot of brands that do that. I have a Chia Pet. Do you know what a Chia Pet is? It's this kind of a clay pot that you put water in and it grows like ferns on the top of it. And so I have an Obama Chia Pet. I have no idea how this happened, but someone sent this to me, and it's got kind of a clay face of President Obama, and then you put water on it, and this little ivy stuff grows out of his hair. I'm like, that's really cool. It's really stupid, but it's really cool. I have no respect for myself that I own one, okay? I do not, I feel embarrassed. But it's a fad, and people buy fads. So if you can create a lot of emotional energy around a product, you just go for the quick burst out of the chutes with it. You know it's going to fade quickly, and you build another product that's equally weird, strange, or novel, and you go for it. That's a fad. Starbucks was never a fad. It was never designed to be just something really cool and trendy, and then it would disappear, and then they'd come up with some new novelty. They were, for the longest time, a solid brand. They had a lot of respect. If you were a restaurant within the 5 or 6 blocks of the first Starbucks store, you would have loved this place because they would have ground and roasted the best coffee available. They'd have sold it to you, and you would have served it to your customers at your high-end restaurant, and you would have loved them as a provider of great coffee in the business-to-business space. And that's what they mostly did. Yes, they had a retail storefront, and they would sell roasted coffee and tea to customers who came in, but that was not their primary business. Their primary business was the business-to-business space, okay? So Starbucks was all about selling high-end ground coffee to restaurants. Now, I met somebody who was there in the early days when they were doing that, and he said, we were doing pretty good. We weren't making a lot of money, but we were selling quite a bit of coffee. We didn't make enough money actually to pay for the license plates on our car, on our delivery vehicle, so we had to deliver all of our coffee at night under the cover of darkness for fear that we would be arrested trying to sell our product to the restaurants. They were a solid brand, highly respected for the quality of their product, but nobody really loved them much. There wasn't much of an emotional passion for the brand. So the opportunity comes to be where they actually start selling coffee to the consumer over the counter, still respected for the quality, but not much love. They were a solid brand. The real aspiration was to become a beloved brand, to become a love mark, to have high respect for operational excellence and an emotional connection with the customer. It's why I think Starbucks, in part, was #1 in the CSI in the dining sector in Singapore. The Customer Satisfaction Index. How does a restaurant that doesn't have that much service get #1 in customer satisfaction in Singapore when there are some amazing restaurants that have oodles and boodles of service? And part of it is creating an emotional connection with a customer that returns on average 18 times per month. A relationship that is familiar, that is uplifting, that is just a moment in your day, but is part of the predictable course of your day, where it's comfortable, like putting on your slippers or your favorite jammies or whatever. There's a certain familiarity with it that creates a love, and the product is solid, that creates a respect. So the goal is to become a beloved brand. And Starbucks got the idea because they watched a brand become beloved in Seattle, 2 blocks away. And that brand is the Pike Place Fish Market. And the Pike Place Fish Market is owned by a guy by the name of Johnny Yokoyama. Johnny's a good friend of mine. I love Johnny. I really do love this man. He's an amazing guy. He will tell you he was a jerk for much of his life. And I can't disagree. But he's an amazing man who I love. Because much of his life, he was angry and bitter, and he had a terrible company. It was a commodity at the biggest end. There was no love, no respect for what he was running. He ran a fish market called the Pike Place Fish Market, not because he wanted to, but because he had to. He wanted to take over a beloved brand of his father's. His father owned a little produce stand, just a few feet away from Johnny, where Johnny is working at this fish market. His dad owned this produce stand, so why didn't Johnny take over the business, right? Just take over your family business. Because there was no family business to take over at the time that Johnny entered the workforce. His last name was Yokoyama. That was a problem. In the United States at that time, if your last name was Yokoyama, they rounded you up. They took you to another location called an internment camp. Also called a relocation camp, because they relocated you from your house to someplace you did not want to be. Where did they relocate you to? To these barbed wire surrounded tar paper hut villages that we called internment camps. It was right after World War II, after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. The United States was paranoid that Japanese Americans were somehow or another going to commiserate with the Japanese, and they were a danger to the safety and security of the U.S., and FDR signed a presidential executive order, and next thing you know, all the Japanese Americans were taken away to their little communities of safety. And Johnny's dad's business was taken away too. So when he returned from the internment camp and Johnny had to find a job, he goes and he finds a job at a fish market, and he could see where his dad's business had been. Kind of makes you a little bitter, doesn't it? Looking out every day at what he could have had instead of what he had. So Johnny's working for this fish market. He does not like this fish market job at all. He said it stinks. Literally. And the fish market was terrible. It was a terrible company. No respect, no love, a true commodity. They thought they were selling fish. They had no relationships with the customers. They were nasty, mean, and angry, all of them, including the owner, who said, I cannot ever get my fish stand to sell at any level other than last among 5 fish stands. I hate this business. And then he said to Johnny, will you buy it from me? Kind of a great sales pitch, don't you think? Johnny said, no, why would I want your fish market? And the owner said, because it's cheap. I'll give it to you for $10,000 US. Please take my fish market. Johnny said no. The guy said, okay, how about $5,000 US? Wow, when they lower the price by 50% and you haven't even made a counter offer, that's a deal. But Johnny said no. The guy said, well, what do you think it's worth? Johnny said, how am I supposed to know? Am I supposed to be able to appraise fish markets? Maybe $3,500, I don't know. The guy said, sold. Johnny said, wow. I guess I own a fish market. He owned the Pike Place Fish Market. He did not like his job. He worked 70, 80 hours a week. All they were doing was selling fish. It was a commodity, no respect, no love. Johnny Yokoyama said, I got to do something. I'm going to die on top of these dead fish someday. I mean, I'm working so hard. Nobody's going to want to buy my fish market. I mean, there's no value, no equity in this thing. There is no exit plan except death. So Johnny Yokoyama decided he would then do something different. And he went out and he started buying fish off the fishing boats in Seattle. It was a wholesale business. He bought those fish and then he'd distribute to himself first in retail and to other retail establishments. He knew nothing about wholesale. He was bad at retail, okay? He didn't know anything about wholesale. He was in a sinking boat going down in retail, and he jumped onto a boat he knew nothing about called wholesale, and he lost $50,000 in the first month of operation. And Johnny Yokoyama had no line of credit to cover a $50,000 shortfall. So he went to the place that no man would ever want to go for money. He went to his mother-in-law. You change quickly when you have to do that, let me assure you. And Johnny Yokoyama borrowed $50,000 from his mother-in-law and then started seeking consultation on how to change his business, how to take it from a commodity to a beloved brand. And the first bit of advice he got from consultants was, Johnny, you got to talk to your customers and you got to talk to your employees. You start with your internal customers, your employees, and then you go to your external customers. So Johnny listened to the consultants. Go figure why he would do that. And I can remember back, the first meeting of the Pike Place Fish Market went something like this. All these fishmongers in a cooler with dead fish all around. And Johnny saying to them, okay guys, what should we do to make this place work? See, the philosopher Paul Tillich said the first act of love is to listen, and the first act of leadership is to listen too. So Johnny had been encouraged to listen to his people, and finally, after a few fist fights among fishmongers because they disagreed with each other and we hadn't set ground rules that said you can't fight and beat each other up and you have to actually not use violence to handle disputes. After a few of those, one fishmonger said, I got it, guys. Let's be world famous. You can imagine as a consultant this notion that world famous is not a strategy. You have a bad attitude owner with a bad haircut, and you're going to become world famous with no money? How's that going to happen? But Johnny listened more, and he said, tell me what you mean by that. And the fishmonger said, let's treat customers like they are world famous. I would have never expected that, would you, in terms of what that meant? I thought it would mean go hire Saatchi & Saatchi, create an advertising buzz, create marketing strategy. But all it meant was we're going to take a customer-centric focus and define the outcome of what the customer should feel, and we're going to execute. Wow. If we do that, we're going to change this brand from a commodity? No way. Well, sure enough, they stopped measuring how many fish the fishmongers sold, because they weren't selling any fish anyway, really. And they start focusing on what it would be like if you treated everybody who came up to this fish stand as if they were world famous. If, as you came up to the fish stand, I went, wow, she is here, whoa! Without that stalker quality, right? But give you my full attention for the short period of time that we're in transaction, in this fish thing. I'll just give it to you like, whoa, she's somebody special. And then after that's done, I'll go over here and I'll go, he's here too. 2 special people in the audience in one day. Who'd have thought it? Wow. And I'm going to give you that kind of attention and focus for just the short bit of time that we're in relationship. And that was the strategy. That every single ordinary person, everyone who felt like they were just part of a crowd, a member of this 100-person audience, that instead of feeling like you're just one of 100, you're the one. And so are you. And that we'd give that attention and focus, and what would happen? Well, so strangely enough, we start measuring. The Pike Place Fish Market started measuring what people were feeling. And they'd have clipboards, and people would come away from a fishmonger, and whether they bought a fish or not, the question would be, so how did it feel to hang out with the fishmonger? Right? And if they said, I kind of felt special, or I felt like kind of a nice person. I felt like something more than a wallet with legs. I felt like a whole being. The fishmongers would get rewarded. That was the whole strategy. And then there were meetings, and basically the meetings would be, okay guys, we want you to commit to being world famous Pike Place Fish. I am world famous Pike Place Fish Joseph Michelli. And what that means is I am committed to treat you as if you're world famous. And I'm also committed to lift up my colleagues so they can help treat you like you're world famous. And that was it. Now, the notion of doing a public declaration of this and getting people to commit to it is that if you do, they're more likely to do it when you're not around. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to do it, because human